Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on successful tender writing. My name is Grant Peden, and I'm a business facilitator with the Entrepreneurs Programme, the Australian Government's flagship programme for productivity and competitiveness at the firm level. I'm joined today by Nick Mondu, who is the principal of Dumont Group. Dumont Group is a boutique consulting and training firm. They specialise in strategy, sales and marketing. Nick has over 15 years experience in tendering, both within Australia and globally, working across multiple business sectors, including defence, government, finance and professional services. I'm going to hand over to Nick now to start the webinar.
Thanks, Grant. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar on successful tendering. It's an hour and a half that we're going to spend talking about, I guess, the fundamentals of tender writing. Obviously, we've got a limited amount of time, and this is quite a novel format, so we're going to try and keep it as interactive as possible, try and get you to input as we go, and try and make it as, I guess, engaging as possible for the next hour and a half. Just in terms of the agenda for today, guys, we're going to start with just looking at the overview of successful tendering. For any of you that have attended a Dumont course before, you'll see that we follow the same kind of delivery methodology. We break down the subject matter into the elements effectively that define what good looks like. So we'll step through those very quickly in just a second. Then we'll contextualise tendering within the overall business winning framework. I think it's important to do that, recognising that a lot of our participants today are from the small and medium-sized enterprise community, and that suggests that tendering is only a small part of what they do day in, day out as part of their business winning activity. Then we'll dive into each of the elements themselves, starting with opportunity identification. This is really around helping you guys to source the right types of opportunities, recognising that we all operate within a resource-constrained environment. It's really important that we do that. Once we've done that, then we'll assess the opportunity in terms of attractiveness. And this is really where we start to look at things like fit with strategy, competitive positioning, and the various discriminators that we can identify for ourselves within the tendering process. Once we've done that, then we're in a much better position to define what we call our win strategy. And that's one of those terms that we'll use today, one of the many, I guess, business winning terms that we'll use throughout the course of the session, which really describes the strategy that we're going to implement to win our tender and how we're going to sell our solution to the customer. Once we've done that, we'll actually look at the mechanics of the proposal development exercise and activity itself. Just what a typical tender might look like and some of the things that we want to be mindful of as we respond to that tender, most notably the customer's requirements. And then we'll finish with thinking about how we submit the tender, the aesthetics of the tender itself, and then what we can do after we've submitted the tender to make sure that we give ourselves the best possible chance of success. And then if we've got time, after all of that, we'll try and take some of your questions and hopefully give you some responses that add value. All right, thanks. So you should all have a copy of your workbooks in front of you or at your disposal. That's effectively the guide, the resource guide that we're going to work through today. So I'll be working off a slide pack that pretty much mirrors that workbook. So I'm just flicking into the next section there. Learning objectives, I've kind of touched on these already, but just to reiterate them, we want you to walk away, I know it's only an hour and a half, but we want you to walk away with some practical insights that you can implement into your businesses immediately. So the first thing that we want to do is really give you a baseline, better understanding of how to identify the right types of tender winning opportunities. One of the tools that we're going to get you to practice and give you today is what we call the bid no bid assessment matrix. One of the biggest challenges I find that small businesses have is knowing when to bid and when not to bid. So what we've come up with here at Dumont is a really short, practical, insightful tool that helps you decipher whether you're in a competitive position or not, and really whether you should be bidding that opportunity or not. Then we'll talk about some of the other tools and methodologies that you can implement in your businesses to help you become better tenderers on top of that bid no bid matrix. So things like the gate review process and independent reviews can really help you increase your chances of success on a tender. Big part of this is understanding the customer. If we don't understand our customers, chances are we're not going to do a particularly good job of responding to the tender. So a real key to success is being able to know our customers, define their requirements appropriately, and respond to that effectively in the tender. And then finally, the last learning objective is really to give you these tools so that you can, at whatever level, implement them in your businesses, as I say, immediately to add value to your tendering process. Okay? All right, moving on. As I said, we'll kind of ask you questions as we go. The 5 elements, if you like, of successful tendering are mapped out on that slide there. I've covered those already, so I'll jump into the next section of the slide, which is really around trying to contextualize where tendering sits within the overall business winning activity. And we do this because a lot of our clients say to us, well, tendering's really, only a small part of what we do. And that's probably true, but when we break it down, the kind of return on investment, if you like, that goes into that is significant. So it's important that we get it right. And what you see in front of you there is what we call the pitching pyramid, which tries to articulate that variation, if you like, in the business winning activity. At the very top of the pyramid is what we call the business as usual activity. And for a lot of small businesses, that's quoting. You'll have regular customers that know who you are, know what you're all about, and they'll want more of the same. They don't need to go through a formal tender process to do that. They can just simply request a quote. And we find that a lot of our clients generate a lot of their sales through that activity. So quoting is arguably one of the lower level effort business winning activities you'll undertake, but it's one of the highest return in terms of revenue generation. Next level down, and as we go down the pyramid, obviously the level of effort associated with the activity becomes a little bit greater, hence why we've got a pyramid, is formal proposals. So we find that a lot of our clients do have to write formal proposals. Typically they're for slightly larger value business winning opportunities. So having a really robust and standardized, repeatable approach to how you write your proposals, I think, is critical for success, as it is quite a significant part of the business winning activity. Finally, and I guess what we're here to talk about today is formal tenders. That is at the base of the pyramid, and it represents the level of effort that goes into these things. More often than not, the drivers around tenders are the value and the risk elements of the tender. So the level of rigor, if you like, and granularity that goes into the tender assessment process, tender development process, tender response and evaluation process is far greater. So we look at that and recognise that from an overall business winning activity perspective, it's not everything. But it is critical in terms of getting it right, because the return on investment that can come from that in terms of the scale of the opportunities that our clients are able to generate is far greater than the other two up the pyramid. So just to help us along today, I'm really keen to kind of get a gauge of where our participants sit within that pyramid. So we've created a bit of a poll to see what percentage of your business winning activity is actually achieved through tendering. And we've got 4 options there on the poll, I think, which look at breaking that down. If you can just spend 30 seconds just responding to that, it would be fantastic. That'll give us a better idea of where you guys sit within the pyramid. Thanks, guys. So just all have a crack at that.
And we've got the four ranges here, guys. So, is it less than 25%? Is it between 25 to 50%? Is it between 50 to 75%, or is it more than 75%? We're just trying to get a sense of what percentage of your business winning activity is achieved through tendering. So if you could just respond to that poll now, and then we can continue. So some interesting answers here, Nick.
Coming already, yeah. How are we going?
It looks like the majority of you, more than 60% of you, less than 25% of your business winning activities achieved through tendering, which is quite a telling statistic. Mm-hmm. Roughly only about 20% between 25 and 50%, about 15% between 50 and 75%, and then the remainder more than 75%. So yeah. Quite a telling statistic there. Mm-hmm. But the majority of you, around about 60%, almost 2/3 of you, less than 25% of your business winning activity is achieved through tendering. So that's
not surprising, Grant. Actually, not surprising, guys, at all. Tendering, as I said, is one of those activities that, for a lot of smaller businesses in particular, is few and far between. I think about certain sectors where tendering is very prevalent, particularly government. The government sector, obviously, most even lower value opportunities go through a formal proposal or tendering process. But we find that data there is pretty consistent with our client base in terms of where they're generating their sales. And that to me suggests that these are relatively established businesses with established clients that they've obviously done a good job of getting over the line in terms of convincing them on their value proposition, who they are, what they do, and what they can do for that particular client. And the bulk of their revenue as a consequence of that is coming through that repeat business, that quoting process that they'll go through. So very consistent with what we find with our clients normally. It's a good segue into the next section of the course, actually, which is the opportunity identification phase. So when we think about where we source our opportunities and how we identify those, it's important to stay, focused on the alignment of those opportunities with our overall strategies and business plans. So, one of the questions I was really keen to put to the audience today, because it's a bit of a bugbear of mine, a hobby horse issue of mine, is that one of the fundamental capability gaps in a lot of small businesses, you probably know, Grant, is a lot of them don't get to benefit from having a valid, up-to-date strategic plan.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, from a business winning perspective, absolutely critical, because it guides the business winning activity. Unless you've got some kind of view on what the business's vision is, the direction that the business wants to go, the customer segments it wants to target, then it's very difficult to know whether you're pursuing the right types of opportunities or not. So I actually wanted to get, I'm going to put the pressure back on and see what the guys tell us around how many of them have actually got a valid, up-to-date strategic plan that they can point to when they're identifying opportunities. Can we just get a response from the audience, please, on that? If you could just give me a yes or no, I think would do, and we can just calculate a percentage from that, I believe. How many of you have got and it can be a 3-year plan, whilst I like to plan in 5-year cycles, I recognise a lot of small businesses, 3 years is probably as good as it gets. If you can just give us a quick gauge on how many of you have got a valid, up-to-date strategic plan, that would be really helpful.
So quite an interesting results this one, Nick. So the majority of you, around about sort of between 55 and 60%, have a strategic plan, an up-to-date and valid strategic plan. So around about 55%, Nick.
It's not bad.
Actually have. So just more than half of you have a valid and up-to-date strategic plan, which is great to hear. Mm-hmm. But I guess the flip side of that is that there's a lot of you that don't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
almost half, right? Which is actually, some of the anecdotal statistics that we use is, I think the banking sector did a review of this last year, and they found that only 1 in 5 businesses had a valid, up-to-date strategic plan, which is pretty consistent with what we found in our business working with clients. So, look, I think that's quite impressive. If we've got just over half our audience with valid plans, well done, guys. That's great. But as you say, quite a concern that almost half the group haven't. And the importance of that, just to put it into context, is as a senior management team or as a business owner, you want to have absolute confidence year in, year out that your team and your business are pursuing the right types of business winning opportunities. Once we've got that framework in place, we can make decisions a lot more confidently. We can empower our business winners to go out and source new business winning opportunities more confidently. And we can invest, most significantly, I guess, we can invest in the right types of business winning opportunities that are going to support the achievement of our vision and our strategy. So that's a key message for today, really, is It's very hard to justify pursuing any type of business winning activity, tender or otherwise, without having the backup of a strategic plan that supports that endeavour. Recognising that when you do move into the tendering process, the amount of investment that you make in terms of human resource and time to actually pursue those things can be in particular sectors, in particular defence and infrastructure, can be very, very significant and time consuming. So it's good to know. And I would encourage that 45% to go out there and really think about that this year in terms of how they can fill that capability gap. And I'm sure there's a grants organisation or an agency out there working with businesses small and large to help fill those capability gaps, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, guys, we do have a question capability today. So if at any time during the webinar you do have any questions that come to mind, you don't need to wait to the end. Just use the question facility that you've got there, and just fire us in any questions as well, and we'll do our best to answer them. So anything at all, just fire them through.
Great, absolutely. Yeah, happy to answer those. So now, I guess building on the concept of having the value of having a strategic plan. One of the real keys to success in tendering is understanding your environment. And of course, a strategic plan and a strategic planning process drives that thinking into the business. So it really thinks about the external environment, the markets that you want to operate in, the customers that you're going to sell to, and the competitors that you're going to have to beat, as well as the internal capabilities that you've got within your organisations, the people, processes, tools and technologies that you need to bring to bear to win the business, to realise the strategy. So we've in the workbooks there in the slide pack in front of me now, we've got a section on really making sure you check your analytics, whether it's done through your strategic plan or independently through your business winning resources. Understanding that environment, the business environment that you're looking to win business in, is absolutely critical. What are your various vehicles for doing that? And some of the useful links that we've put in the workbook there on the left-hand side of the page, we found invaluable in the past. They're predominantly government resources, state and federal. You should all be, if you're not already, signed up to tenders.gov.au or Austender. Really useful resources, not just for notifying you of major government tenders that are being released across all sectors, so government, immigration, defence, health, etc., but also a really good resource for finding out valuable information on what your competitors are doing and some of the, recipients of major tenders and grants in the past, which of course then helps you with your market and competitor intelligence. And all of these things are designed to make sure that you have a full understanding, you benefit from a full understanding, intelligence as we like to call it in the business winning world, that allows you to write and execute your tender more successfully. So really important that you understand your markets, your customers and your competitors. And then of course your internal capabilities, which we will talk about shortly. In fact, one of the segues into that now is as we move on to the next slide, we've got an example of what we call a gate review process now. So this is just a generic example, Grant, of what a typical gate review process might look like, and I'm sure you've seen this before. We put this up as a kind of blueprint on how an organisation might think about tenders from cradle to grave, effectively. So from the initial opportunity identification, the twinkle in a business development person's eye, all the way through to hopefully submitting and winning that tender and signing the contract. So what we see there in front of you guys is a staged approach to executing that. We do say to people, look, this is designed to be tailored for each organisation. It's not a one-size-fits-all type model. So we really want to think about how this fits with our own organisation more than anything, and what's appropriate and what we might already have, I guess, in the business in terms of internal review processes. All this simply says is let's apply some rigour and some focus to the internal review of our tendering activities, in particular those major tenders where we've got a lot on the line. And I'm thinking here those big, large, high-value strategic tenders that have the ability to transform your business. And there's lots of examples of that. Businesses have been made off the back of successful government tendering, as you'd well know, Grant. So just very quickly, the stages that it looks at, and as I said, this is quite a detailed view. It looks at the initial opportunity identification, and during that initial opportunity assessment phase, which we'll talk about in just a second, we'll think about the fit with the business strategy. We'll think about our competitiveness, but the level of detail at this stage is quite high level. We wouldn't expect more than a basic summary of the opportunity, fit with plan, and overall probability of win based on what we know today. And what we're looking for there is really, management approval to be able to go forward with that opportunity more confidently. So that we can then go away, do a little bit more work, and move into the next stage, which is really around, defining the opportunity a little bit more. So looking at the customer's requirements, and quite often this is before, or should be, before the RFT is actually released. So if we look at the model itself, we're trying to get ahead of the curve where we see at the top of the model, we've got an RFT release a couple of steps down. We're trying to do things that position us for success before that RFT. Request for tender, guys. I'm not teaching you how to suck eggs here, but that's what RFT means, request for tender. We're trying to position ourselves as well as we can prior to that RFT being released. So we want to go away, develop a capture plan if we can, and capture plan is one of those business winning terms I mentioned before that helps us both internally and externally define our solution and create an overall definition of how we're going to win that particular tender. That's then used as an internal document to sell the solution to our management, but also potentially as an external document to shape and influence the customer's requirements. Something that we don't do enough of, in my opinion, in the tendering process. Having done that, and again, gotten management approval around that high-level solution, we want to move to the next stage, which is really where we get to refine what we call our win strategy, yet another wonderful business-winning term. The win strategy really, for me, is the essence of why a customer is going to choose you. It's effectively your customer's value proposition. Developed, defined, and put to the customer. So we want to make sure that that's as solid as possible before we get to the tender writing phase. And that's something that, for me, the internal review process should really drive and tease out. If that win strategy isn't well defined or isn't particularly strong, that's cause for concern, in my opinion. So any internal review process worth its salt is really pushing, testing, and challenging the business winning community to really get that win strategy defined ahead of time, to not only give them confidence that we've got a chance of winning this thing, but also give the customer a really strong, compelling argument for why they should choose us. So as we move into the next stage, we're really right at the point where the RFT is about to be released. Some organisations choose to develop what we call a proposal development plan, which then really is almost a project management plan for how you're going to execute the tender once it's released. The internal review process at that stage is really around allocating resources. Once you get to that stage, management is committed, and it's allowing you, giving you a green light, if you will, to go out there and resource this thing, spend some time, spend some money, and put the full resource of the organisation behind the tender. So at that stage, the win strategy needs to be really strong. Management needs to be convinced that this is a winning proposal, and the team needs to be resourced adequately to not do a botched job on the actual tender response. So that the tender gets released and we're well positioned, we're prepared, and we've shaped and influenced the customer as much as we can prior to that RFT coming out. Because as you know from government grant, once the RFT is released, it's actually very difficult to get in and talk to the customer and do those things, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So then you're into the trenches really, and at the coalface of the tender response. So we will talk a little bit about what that might look like, and we've got a breakdown in your workbooks that shows what a typical RFT set of requirements looks like. We'll develop our proposal. We'll make it as strong and as compelling as possible. We'll submit that. We'll prepare ourselves for post-submission examination, which can quite often happen in certain sectors, particularly government, where these guys are really keen to often in competitive environments, test and challenge their evaluation criteria and make sure that they've got the right tenderer for the job. So they'll go through things like offer definition activities just to close out that last 10% of uncertainty they might have around their prospective tenderers, before then obviously selecting the successful tenderer and moving into the award phase, contract signing phase. So really what you see there just beneath that, guys, is a series of gates, and we've simplified this. Believe you me, some of the larger organisations I've worked with in the past have much more detailed breakdowns of this, but for small and medium-sized businesses, we find 4 gates is the absolute maximum you'd kind of want to go through, and those 4 gates kind of mirror that life cycle and give you an opportunity to test and challenge how you're going at each phase of that tendering process. A really important element is the last section of the chart at the bottom there, which is the team reviews. In the early days, Dumont spent a lot of time working with companies as an outsourced service provider of tendering solutions. We've moved away from that now because we just don't see the value in that. And what I mean by that is we don't see the value of having clients outsource the intellectual property of how to win tenders. It is so integral to the business, to the success of a business, to understand, have a base level understanding in tendering and business winning in general, that I think it's a risk that you create by outsourcing that wholly to a service provider, third-party service provider. What we prefer instead, and what we think is a lot more effective, is to have independent experts come in throughout each of those gates and give you independent advice on how you're travelling. Because one of the things that companies find difficult is independence. We're all guilty, I guess, of drinking our own bathwater when it comes to tender writing. We kind of convince ourselves we've got the best win strategy in the world and the customer is dying to buy what we're selling. Sometimes it's really helpful to get a third party, an objective third party involved to kind of come in and test and challenge our assumptions to make sure that we've got something that's as good as we think it is. So what you see there at the bottom, the blue team review, is a review that really is designed to test the win strategy. So slightly earlier on, before the RFT is released, have we got a really compelling win strategy here? Is it valid? Is it going to allow us to compete and hopefully win this opportunity? Black hat reviews are really around competitor assessment, really important in competitive environments that we understand what our competitors are going to be doing, what they're going to be submitting as part of their tenders. That allows us to then in turn define our own competitive discriminators, those unique selling points, if you like, that we can put in our tender as part of our win strategy. And there's quite often a feedback loop between the blue team and the black hat to really strengthen that win strategy. And then really post RFT, we're looking at things like pink and red team reviews to get independent perspectives on the developments of our proposal writing submissions, the TDRs, the tender document requirements that we're developing and submitting for the customer. The red team being an important review. It's the final, effectively the final review that's done from the perspective of the customer. So third-party organisations or independent agents will come in and take on the role of the customer and role play that and review your submission on behalf of the customer and give you quite often really valuable feedback on what the customer's thoughts are in terms of your proposal. Really as a last opportunity for you to refine that submission and make it as strong as possible. And then the final review, which we'll talk about at the end, is that kind of what we call a white team, which is that continuous improvement, lessons learned review of how we've gone at the end of the tendering process. We're always learning organisations, and as we go through every tender process, we're going to pick something new, whether it's around the commercial arrangements that we set up with that customer, the financing arrangements, the technical compliance challenges that we had, how we responded to certain questions the customer might have. These are all learning opportunities that we need to incorporate into future tenders so that we don't reinvent the wheel. So that final review there is really a lessons learned capture opportunity at the end of the tendering process.
I think we've got a question just come in from Virginia from Specialized Geo up in Hunter there. Virginia is asking, is the Gate 4 validate bid decision, is that part of the debrief or feedback from the client to determine the aspects of the tender that require improvement?
No, typically, that's a good question. Virginia, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question, Virginia. the gate reviews, as you see them on the slide, they're really all internal reviews. So they're designed to be management reviews, internal management reviews at that stage. The customer doesn't really get involved until post-submission. So I think the earliest you could expect to get a call from the customer would be through an offer definition exercise, which again in the government sector is very popular. When they're not quite sure who to select, or they're not quite clear about a certain aspect of your submission, they'll quite often bring you in for what they call an offer definition exercise, where they'll ask you a few more questions about a specific aspect of your solution. So the gate reviews really are internal management reviews, and designed as opportunities for your own internal resources to get that right.
A couple of you have also asked, the gate review generic process is not actually in the work, but a couple of companies have asked, can we get a copy of this process as well?
Sure. Yeah, we're happy to provide that. We'll send that out after as an additional resource. Okay. No worries. All right, we'll move on. Thanks for your questions, guys. That's really good.
Now, did you want to ask a poll on this at all?
Oh, I think I did. I think one of the things I wanted to, good reminder, Grant. I'm glad you're here. Just to get a gauge, before we started today, I just wanted to get a gauge on how many companies have actually got some form of internal review process. Again, with our work with smaller businesses, we find that very few of them have. So I just wanted to do a bit of a dip check on how many companies today have got some form of internal review process that might look similar to or align to what we've just discussed there from a business winning perspective. So if you could all just give us a yes or no on that would be fantastic.
And it doesn't have to be the same as this, guys. Or just, do you have some form of process for getting your business winning activity? So something's better than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the initial results are just coming in now, Nick. So it's looking roughly 50-50.
That's not bad.
Slightly more. Oh no, it's just changed. So yeah, it's around about 50-50. So about half of you do have some form of internal review process for business winning. Around about half don't. So how does that sort of tally with your experience now?
Yeah, not bad. Again, I'd have to look at. I had a quick look at the list of attendees before the session, and it was a real mix of smaller businesses and slightly larger businesses. So I think given the number of small businesses we had in there, I'm impressed. I think 50% is a strong showing. Again. It's not a beat-up session. It's not about kind of pointing the finger and saying, why haven't you got this, guys? Like the strategic plan, it's just, I guess, my thoughts on some practical processes that you can put in place, some fundamentals, I guess, that you can put in place that are really going to help you be more successful at business winning and tendering in particular. So a solution to not having that is the independent review process. So for the 50% that haven't got anything in place at the moment, a really cost-effective way to get that is to go through this independent review engagement process, where you can go out and get subject matter experts at each stage, engage them for a day or two to work with you and really test and challenge aspects of your tender response to make sure that you cost-effectively benefit from that third-party expertise without having to carry that full-time in your business. Okay. All right, moving on. Just going to move into the opportunity assessment stage now. Look, and given the time constraints, I wanted to use this time to really focus people's efforts on something practical that they could go away and implement in their businesses immediately to benefit them in the tendering process. And one of the, I guess, most useful tools that we've created over recent years is the bid/no-bid assessment tool. I think companies like this because it gives them a structured framework to work through when they're assessing whether they should be bidding something or not. We recognise the resource constraints that go into the tendering process, and whilst we'd like to kind of be able to pursue everything and bid everything well, we're not always often able to do that. So the bid/no-bid analysis tool is something that's designed to give you a relatively quick, sharp and useful insight on how to do that more effectively. And in fact, it's something that you could use to present to your internal management to convince them that you've actually got something strong and robust here. You're backing a winner. So what I'm going to do, if it's okay with everybody, is actually work through that with them right now and go through the bid no bid assessment tool to give you some hands-on experience of applying that. The tool itself is broken into two parts. The first part is really designed to assess the attractiveness, if you like, of the overall opportunity. So as we go through these questions, we're thinking about things like strategic alignment. I mentioned that earlier. You know, how does this opportunity, this tender, fit with our overall business plan and strategy? From that, we'll have a gauge of market attractiveness. If it's in the sweet spot of what we're doing, then it makes a lot of sense to pursue that. If it's not, it doesn't mean that we throw it out. It just means that we've got to have a plausible set of reasons for why we're pursuing it. And it might be diversification. It might be strategic growth. There's a whole bunch of different reasons why you might do that. We're seeing a lot of that, obviously, in sectors like the mining sector, the automotive sector, where companies are looking to diversify and as a consequence, looking to apply the capabilities they've got into new sectors. So there's lots of reasons why people might deviate from their core strategy. Customer value, technical risk, market risks, financial returns, you know, how does that fit? Is it going to be profitable? And can we comply? And compliance is very important, and we've got a section on that later. So this first section really looks at that. The way it works is we're going to go through each of the questions. There's 14 questions in the first part, which you can see in your workbooks. And I'd like you to, if you can, either in your workbooks or on a bit of paper next to your computer, just work through this with me. And I'll hopefully go slow enough so we can all do it at the same pace. The scoring system is quite simple. For the first part, it assesses the attractiveness of the opportunity using 4 measures. 5, if we mark ourselves as 5 against the question, it means that we believe that against that tender opportunity, we've got a very strong competitive advantage. Now, I hasten to add that these things are quite rare. And normally born out of something like a unique capability, a competitive discriminating capability. Now, as we go through this, what I've tried to encourage people to do is if you've got a tender that you're working on right now, or one that you've recently worked on, if you haven't, use that as the reference for this assessment. Use that as the basis of the scoring, because it'll be fresh in your mind. And we often find that when we work through this with clients, participants that are actually lining up a tender in the next 3 to 6 months, it's actually a lot more beneficial for them, and they can have an aha moment where they look at that and think, oh, okay, well, we didn't actually think about that, maybe we should.
And funny you should say that, Nick, because Joe from the Gourmet Goat Lady has just come on to make a comment. They've just put in a proposal, and they're discussing right now why they were unsuccessful. So, Joe, this will hopefully be very useful for you. I
hope so, Joe. Let's maybe come back to Joe at the end of this and tell us whether he thinks that there's a fit here with some of these questions and some of the scoring issues that came out of that. So if you've got a tender in mind, that's really going to help you focus this exercise. So 5 is initially where we think we've got an area of real competitive advantage. I want you only to put 5 down when you can point to something strong that supports that. Next one down is 3. I want you to score yourself 3 if you believe that particular question is neutral. It doesn't really impact positively or negatively on your overall submission. So it's a bit of a neutral point. 1, I want you to give yourself a score of 1 if you think that particular element is going to put you at a serious competitive disadvantage.
So you don't want any 2s or 4s next, just 1, 3 or 5, okay?
Just 1, 3 or 5,
yep.
Or 0, okay, if you just don't know. So 0 is for unknown. So if you just simply don't know, mark yourself down as 0. And the model's designed to incorporate that. So the scoring at the end that we'll complete at the end takes that into account. So there are your 4 options: 5, 3, 1, or 0. You might have noticed the deal killer column on the right-hand side of the model. I just want to be clear on what that is. if you've scored yourself 1 in any of those initial 14 questions, that might potentially be a deal killer for you. So you've basically said that you're in a position of serious competitive disadvantage. Unless you can think of a solution around that, some form of mitigation, and that might come in the form of partnering, it might come in the form of investment in capability, it might come in the form of throwing internal resource at it, I don't know. Unless you can think of a solution to overcome that, then that becomes a deal killer. So I want you to mark yes next to that if it is a deal killer. So really, we're only looking at deal killers here where we've got 1, which is a position of serious competitive disadvantage. So let's just go through each of those, 1 to 14. So the first one is the opportunity aligned with our own strategic direction? So is there a fit there with our own strategy? So I want you to mark that 5 for yes, it absolutely is in the sweet spot. In fact, it's absolutely critical to our business plan strategy. If we win this, it will set us up for the future. If we don't, it will seriously harm us in terms of the markets that we operate in. 3, yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of in the plan, but it's not a game changer. It's not a deal breaker. Or 1, it's not in the plan. It's a complete deviation from the plan where we're potentially diversifying. Or 0 for we simply haven't got a plan, so we don't know. Yeah. So give yourself a score on that one. Moving down, do we know who the other competitive bidders are, if any? Ideally, we haven't got any, because that puts us in a fantastic position, but it's very, very rare. So again, same scoring system. If we know we're absolutely across it, like wheat on rye, then we'll give ourselves a 5. We understand our competitors intimately. 3, yeah, we kind of know who they are, but we don't know them intimately. Would be a 3. 1, we've got no idea, which is dangerous. So we're in a position of serious competitive disadvantage. So 1 if we've got no idea effectively. In 0, we think we do, but we're not sure. We've not really looked at that. Okay, so give yourself a score on that. Thirdly, is a competitor an incumbent, and does this pose a threat? Now, one of my golden rules is if you're trying to dislodge an incumbent, and we all know what we mean by an incumbent, an existing supplier that's already in there, delivering to the customer. If that customer is, that incumbent is delivering well to that customer and the customer thinks they're doing a fantastic job, it's going to take something very compelling to dislodge them, in my experience. So this is really around understanding that position. So do we understand that? If we do, we're across it. We've analysed it. Give ourselves a 5. If we're not quite, we know a little bit about them, but we haven't really done as much homework as we probably should. But we think we can get away with it. It's a 3. 1, yeah, well, we don't know enough about that incumbent, then put ourselves down as a 1, and we just haven't done our homework, and it's a 0. Fourthly, will winning enhance our reputation and market positioning? Now, if we win this thing, will it be a real shot in the arm for the business? Will it project our profile in the market and in our environment? Again, similar scoring system. 5 if it's really good for that. 1 if it's really bad, 0 if we just don't know, 3 if it doesn't really matter. 5th, will winning open up new market opportunities for us? So again, if we've got a strategy here, we can show strong alignment between how winning this opportunity, this tender, is going to open up new opportunities for us off the back of it. So if we've done our homework on that and we think we're really well positioned to prosecute that, then we should put ourselves down as 5. 3, it doesn't really matter. 1, not winning it will put us in a position of serious competitive disadvantage, and 0, we're not really sure. 6, I'm going to start picking up the pace here, guys, just to get through these. So give yourself a score on that. Will winning give us an advantage over our competitors? And a classic example here is losing, particularly in government tendering, there are sometimes what we call these big binary opportunities, game changers, where the incumbent kind of has the opportunities to grow and dominate that market segment. Is that particular tender one of those opportunities for you? 5, if winning it puts you in that position. 1 if losing it puts you in a really bad position, and 0 if you just don't know. And again, as you go through this, remember you've got the deal killers, yes or no. Is it a deal killer or not for the ones that you've assigned yourself? Do we have resources, talent, and the will to win this opportunity? That's about internal management commitment. Is the business behind this? If they are and they're really supportive and motivated, then it's a 5. If they're not, it's a risk. If they're indifferent, give yourself a 3. If you're not sure, then there shouldn't be too many zeros here, because in my experience, they're either behind you or they're not. Yeah. Do we have the resources and the ability to deliver? That's about capability and capacity to a large extent. So, yeah, we're really well positioned. We've got resource and capacity in abundance. We're at a 5. 1, we're going to have to beg, steal and borrow. It's just one man and his dog trying to put together a major tender, which puts us in a really tricky position. 3, we'll get through, but we're neither under-resourced or over-resourced. Number 10, are we able to easily source additional resources if required? So, again, that links back to management commitment or our teaming solution in terms of the partners that we can bring in to help respond to that tender. Give yourself a score against that. Do we have a strong management support and sponsorship? So again, it's very similar to the resource allocation. One kind of goes with the other. If management are behind it, then strongly behind it, give yourself a 5. If not, give yourself a 1. Do you have a high probability of win? That's another one of those business winning terms that we like to use. Probability of win is thinking about the market environment that we're in, the competitive landscape that we're in, the win strategy that we've developed. How compelling is our offer to the customer? Do we think that puts us in a really strong position? 5 if we think it does. 1 if we don't think it's that compelling and we're a bit concerned. Will winning achieve significant collateral benefit to our existing projects? So is this going to allow us to achieve economies of scale? Is a really good example of that. Synergies in other areas. And we find that a lot with ICT businesses that we work with, software developers, systems engineers that get brought into businesses. Quite often the learning and the capabilities that these resources develop can then get reapplied onto other projects. So a really good example of that for me. And then finally, what are the consequences of losing or not bidding? Will it freeze you out of that market segment? Will the customer frown upon you? 5 if it's going to have a really big impact. 1 if not responding is going to harm you significantly, and 0 if you really don't know. 3 if it doesn't really matter. All right. So I want you to give yourself a score for each of those. Total up those scores. So we'll just give you a minute just to make sure you've assessed that correctly and totaled up your scores. I also want you to count the number of, as you can see in your workbook, ones that you've given yourselves. So remember, those are the things that should be of real concern at this stage, because they're going to potentially put you in a position of serious competitive disadvantage. So unless you've got a mitigation strategy for that, a solution, I also want you to put that down as a deal killer. So I want you to total up how many deal killers you might have.
And guys, if you do have any questions on any of these at all, because I know this might be the first time for a lot of you, if you have any questions at all on any of these questions that are part of the assessment, just fire them through and we'll do our best to answer them. Absolutely, yeah. I'm just hoping and praying everybody's still with us, Grant, and working through the table. I hope so. Yeah. I'm not sure if everybody signed up for this level of work, but I think you'd find it a really useful exercise, guys, if you do take the time to work through it. All right, shall we move on? So that's the first. We're halfway there, guys. So we're going to move to the second stage, which is really designed to assess the risk profile of the opportunity. Now, as most of you would be aware, risk is a major consideration in business in general. So we really want to think about this from a risk profiling perspective in terms of how this tender opportunity reflects risk
in our business. So we've come up with 18 questions this time. Same scoring system, but turned around here. So whereas previously we had 5 as a really good thing, so 5 was going to give us a high level of competitive advantage. 5 on this assessment means that it's going to be a serious risk. So 5 is bad on this assessment. So I want you to think about 5 as being a serious risk, something that is not good on a particular tender, whereas 1 is minimal risk and therefore a good thing. So it's an inverse of what we've just done from a scoring perspective. 3 will stay the same, as will 0. So we're just flipping it around here slightly. So is the opportunity aligned with your customer core business strategy again? So very similar to the last time. If it's not aligned, that might be a serious risk. But as I mentioned before, again, applying the deal killer rule here, if it's a 5, it might be a deal killer. So just to work through a practical example here, is the opportunity aligned with your customer core business strategy? It might not be, Grant, because the business might be diversifying as an example. So it might be a 5, but not a deal killer, because the business is driven to diversification at the moment. What that would say to me is that you need to review your strategy, which goes back to our previous comments on having a valid strategy. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had a number of companies diversifying and put that up as a 5, but not as a deal killer. Has the budget been formally approved and funded? Just as an anecdotal statistic, in my previous organisations, we used to work on a principle of applying 1% of the overall tender contract value to the actual tendering level of effort that we put into it. So say you were working on a $1 million bid, you'd spend $10,000 pursuing that bid, so the 1% rule, if you like. That certainly applies in the larger government tenders, which have long lead times, defence, infrastructure, government services, where you can sometimes go through a 12, 18, 24-month tendering process. So this is really about making sure that you've got the budget to actually pursue the tender. Again, 5 if you haven't, because that's a real serious risk. 1 if it's all in check and you've got no problems there. Do we understand the business need driving this bid? This can be a combination of not having a strategy or internal management support. So really having the business on board and being clear about why we're pursuing this. 5 if we're not, and that's a serious risk. 1 if it's all in hand. Are the requirements clearly defined, and are they technically feasible? This is really around understanding the scope of requirement from the customer. Have we got a really good grasp of that? Are we across it like a rash? Have we shaped and influenced that, ideally, earlier on, prior to the RFT being released? If we have, then give ourselves a 5. A 1. My bad. 5 if we haven't, because that puts us in a position of serious risk. So we haven't been anywhere near the customer. We've not really spent a lot of time understanding the requirements, and we've just had a bit of a crack at it. So that would be a serious risk for me, and therefore a 5. Are the serious business, technical, financial issues behind the scenes identified? So do we understand the business, technical and financial issues that are going on within the customer community? So that's really around the customer's hot buttons, which we'll talk about shortly, and really understanding the customer. 5 if we don't. 1 if it's something that we spend a lot of time understanding. Do we know the tender time frame, and is that realistic? Again, this is really applicable for larger tenders. It goes hand in hand with management commitment. If we don't understand that, then management can get quite antsy when we're looking to commit to a 12, 18, God forbid, 24-month plus tendering process where we're not going to see that return on investment for quite some time. So 5 if we don't, 1 if we do. Do we know? I think we covered that one. Sorry, number 7. Has the prospect already made a make versus buy decision? So this is really around the scope of work and the customer's requirements. Have we been able to go in there and shape and influence that? Are we in a position where we can, in our tender response, give them a compelling value proposition that drives them towards potentially buying our services rather than doing it themselves.
And we've had Nick, we've had Stuart from Leahy Constructions ask, is there another question you could use for the make versus buy question specifically for the construction industry, or is that a question that you could apply regardless of the industry?
I think regardless. I think it's a good question. I like to think about that from a scope of work perspective. In the early stages, it's a really good example of where you can kind of get in and build customer intimacy, sit down with a customer, help them define the requirements, and sneak a value proposition across that suggests that you've got a smarter, more cost-effective, more productive way of doing that than they might have at their disposal. So, for me, this is around core business versus non-core. Businesses tend to want to focus on their core business regardless of which sector they're in. So if we can get them to, in their mind, separate core from non-core, it doesn't matter which sector they're in, it allows us to kind of sneak in a value proposition that says it might be more cost effective, more productive, smarter if you outsource that chunk to us rather than do it yourself. So that's the make bit. So get them to buy that rather than make it.
Good question, Stuart.
Good question, yeah. Is low price a major factor in selecting a winning bid? Price is always going to be a factor. So this question is really interrogating whether price is going to be the dominant factor, which is going to more often than not squeeze your margins. So that really affects another one of the questions that we ask in just a second around rates of return and profitability. So this is really around understanding whether it's going to be financially attractive for you to bid this submit this tender. So 5 if it's a serious risk that price is going to drive the decision. 1 if it's not. Are there penalties for non-delivery on time and within budget? Really important point, this one. From a commercial perspective, we sometimes overlook this and we go in quite naively to what can often be quite sophisticated terms and conditions around things like liquidated damages. This is about the unknowns within a particular contract, and we see this a lot in complex industries like ICT and defence, where quite often the scope of requirement is very complex. The work breakdown structure is not quite defined yet. The technology is first of type, and the boundaries are being pushed in terms of the respondents having to put something forward that they might not be quite sure about. If that is the case, give yourself a 5 because that's a serious risk. If you've never done it before and you've put something in that's going to really push the boundaries of your capability and capacity, then put that in as a 5. If not, if it's business as usual, give yourself a 1. Are the contract terms and conditions acceptable? I think that's the one we've just done. Can we realistically address the risks if we win? So risk management, I encourage all companies to have a risk management plan when they're submitting their tender, regardless of whether the customer requests it or not as part of the tender submission. That allows you to stay on top of all the tricky spots within the delivery aspects of the project, but also some of the what we call positive risks. Over the life of the contract, going back to Stuart's question before around make versus buy, you might get in there in a long-term contract environment, do a really good job of delivering in the first 2 to 5 years, convince the customer that you're a competent supplier, and be able to take on more work share over time. So for me, this is about as much about positive risk as it is negative risk. Have you gone through that process, and have you got a document that supports that? So give yourself a 5 if you have, a 1 if you've not even thought about it. How well are you known in the business sector? That's a really interesting one. This is really around brand profile, credibility, knowledge and risk management in general. If you're known in the market, if you've got a strong pedigree of proven performance, puts you in a much stronger position than an unknown because your risk profile is reduced. You're a known entity, and therefore if you're established and you're delivering and you've got a good program of record, then give yourself a 5. If not, give yourself a 1.
So that's really about perception, isn't it, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We often find decision making driven by brand more than anything. Obviously, price is a major factor, but do we know this supplier? Do we trust them to deliver? Do we have a track record with similar opportunities? Again, linked to that, it's about credibility, it's about trust, it's about being able to demonstrate to the customer that we understand what is required and we can deliver. So it's about reducing your risk profile with that customer. 5 if you have, 1 if you've never done business in this space before, and again, you can't point to anything substantial. Do we have a relationship with this prospect, and is it favourable? Really important. People do business with people at the end of the day, and if we've done business with that client before, if we've done a good job of doing business with that client before, we're in a much better position than an unknown. We're also, through that relationship, creating an incentive effectively for that customer to choose us over the competition. For me, a really strong relationship is almost a competitive discriminator. So 5 if you have, 1 if you haven't, if you've got no relationship at all with the customer. Are partners needed? And if so, will it complicate your solution? More often than not, because of the capability requirements of the project and the capacity issues you might have in your business, you're forced to look into the supply chain, into the market, and partner with people. Again, from a risk perspective, if you've done that before and you've got a proven track record of working with certain organisations, then great. Give yourself a 5 because you've got pedigree around doing that. 1 if you're doing it but you've never really worked with this organisation before, they're taking on a substantial work share as part of the project, and you're a bit nervous as to how that relationship might go. So that's a 1 type scenario. Will winning put any of our existing business at risk? Now, what we mean by that is we could be bidding, we see this a lot with major tenders, customers having, I call it their eyes being bigger than their bellies, seeing an opportunity and not being able to resist without really thinking about the impact it's going to have on their business. And some of these opportunities that I've mentioned before, some of the larger ones in government, infrastructure, defence, those types of sectors, have the ability to transform your organisation. Have you really thought that through? Yes, we have, and we've got a really robust plan. That's a 5. 1, we haven't, and that's going to be a real downstream risk for us.
Just had a couple of questions coming through, Nick, about the scoring. So just to be clear, guys, so the scoring here is score a 5 if it equates to a serious risk, and 1 if it's a minimal risk. So 5 is bad, 1 is good. So if the answer to the question is a positive answer, give it a 1. If the answer to the question is a negative answer, if it's bad, give it a 5. Just to clear that up.
Yeah, on this section.
Yep.
So the inverse of what we did on the opportunity assessment section. 3 being neutral, 0 being unknown. Okay? Thanks, guys. Can we contractually protect our intellectual property? Quite a hot topic at the moment. Obviously, we're all focused on innovation, and therefore we want to make sure that innovation is protected. So have we got the appropriate measures in place, the contractual framework in place that's going to do that? 5 if we have, 1 if we haven't really given that any thought, and we've effectively signed ourselves up to a potential risk in terms of losing that. And finally, does this solution involve new or improving technologies? I gave you a really good example of that just before as a risk profile, because what we've seen in certain sectors, particularly defence, is when we move into that space, when we commit to complex first of type developments, they often go wrong because we don't know what we don't know. So the risk profile of those things goes up significantly. 5 if it is that type of tender, 1 if it's just business as usual, and you're just selling more of the same in terms of the products and services that you're offering. Okay, so I want you to score those up again as we did on the previous section. Total that score up. Again, identify those deal killers that you might have. If you're giving yourself a 5 there, that's a potentially deal-breaking level of risk that you've identified. So that's what I like to class as an unmitigatable risk, something that you can't think of a solution to in terms of remedying or offsetting, and just total those up. And once we've got those 2 scores, guys, we're then going to map that to our opportunity versus risk matrix. So I'll just give you a second to total up those two scores. So we want to take the total scores from the previous section, part 1, and the total scores from section 2 around risk. And as you'll see on the model there's a score there for opportunity. So let's map where the opportunity total score sits within that. And it'll be between A or C effectively on that spectrum, on that left-hand side of the model, on the horizontal axes. And across the bottom there, we want to show the level of risk profile. So we'll have a total score that'll map ourselves against that.
And just while you're doing that, guys, we've had a question, Nick, from Gavin at Ronson Gears on the first half of the assessment on opportunity.
Sure.
Regarding the profitability question, he's just asked, can you explain the profitability question, which is the one, is the potential profitability over 100% of corporate return investments? What do we actually mean by that?
I think I might have skipped over that one, actually.
Oh, no, well, that might be why then.
Yeah, sorry, guys. Yes, good point, Gavin. It's great to see Ronson Gears on here again today. That's my second time this week working with Ronson. Great little Victorian company. That question really goes back to profitability. I think I skipped over it because I touched on it in my example. So this is around really defining as an organisation whether the return on the investment this tender is going to bring into your organisation sits within the bounds of reasonableness of what you're willing to accept as a company. This comes into play in particularly competitive sectors. So I like to think about internal rates of return here. So every time, for example, Demand bids a job, we think that to survive, we need to make a minimum of 10% profit on every job that we do. So after we've paid everybody else, we've got 10% left over. That's our minimum internal rate of return required on any job that we tender. If it's beneath that in our assessments, then we're not going to bid it. So that question is really designed to test whether it's within that range. If it's not, then it's a 5, because that's a serious risk. If it's well and truly within that, it's a 1. If it's highly above that, so you might be looking for 10%, but this is an opportunity for you in your estimates to get between 30 and 40%. That's a 1. Make sense? I hope.
Okay, guys, we've hopefully that's given you enough time just to toss up those scores. We've opened the poll now. So if you could just put in the poll there which section of the grid, so the 2x2 matrix there, A, B, C, D, you lie, having totted up your scores, and then we'll get a bit of a sense of where everyone's at. And Nick, just while we're waiting for those results to come in, what do you think we can expect to see here in terms of the result? What would you be anticipating?
Look, for me, and I used to use this tool myself when I ran business development for some of the larger defence prime contractors. The reality is we should see a spectrum of results. I mean, we'd like everything to sit within that A category, which is it's a really fantastic opportunity and the risk profile is really, really low. But in reality, there's very few of those. So I'd really expect a spectrum of responses. Having said that, given the target audience today and the limited level of tendering that these guys undertake, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a few A's in there, because these guys are looking at tender opportunities, I would assume, as a real opportunity to get strategic growth into their businesses. So when they do embark upon a tendering opportunity, it's because it is highly attractive, and the risk profile tends to be within that more attractive space. So I'll be really interested to see what we come out with, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a real spread.
Yep. So if you could input your results there, guys, on that the 2x2 opportunity risk matrix, and then we'll have a chat about what those might mean.
I'd probably just add to that as well that in recent years, as companies have had to deal with a two-speed economy, the tailing off of the mining sector boom, that's driven a lot of businesses, particularly in the mining and resource sectors, as you'd be familiar, Grant, to pursue less attractive business, more risky business. So, we did this exercise 18 months ago nationally, and we found, particularly in WA, a lot of companies were taking on less attractive business, so low value, high risk, which is where you don't really want to be.
I had a really good question from Amanda at Discovery Parks, who's asked, how can you find out if low price is a major factor in selecting the winning bid? Great question, Amanda.
Yeah, fantastic question, Amanda. Well, for me, that goes back to the customer relationship. There are things that people can read in an RFT, and this is why I always tell people, if your primary source of business winning intelligence is AusTender, if you're finding your tenders from the alerts that are coming out on AusTender, then you're probably behind the curve. The AusTender website for me is a lag indicator. It shouldn't be a lead indicator. It should support what you already know, because the ultimate goal here is to have a really strong relationship with your customer. So through that, you'll have a much better understanding of what it is that they're looking for. You'll be able to anticipate and plan tendering opportunities and business winning opportunities in general a lot better, because you've got a constant dialogue and communication with your customer. So that's why I always push the customer relationship and really investing in that customer relationship as much as possible.
Great. Okay, well look, we've got most of the results
Fantastic.
in now, and I'm very happy to see that nearly 2/3 of you fall into the A category, so the high opportunity, low risk category,
Fantastic,
which is good to hear. About 60%, so nearly 2/3 of you. Very small percentages of you, so about 4% fall into the B, the high opportunity, high risk category. A sizable chunk of you actually fall into the C category, the low opportunity, low risk. So you might want to talk about that in a second, Nick. And again, fairly low numbers, about 8 or 9% of you fall into the D quadrant there, the low opportunity but high risk. So again, a bit of a spread, but it seems that most of you, the majority, almost 2/3 of you, fall into the high opportunity, low risk, which is good to hear.
It is great and pretty consistent with what I was anticipating, actually. So that's good. Great news is that the majority, your number one is A, because that's where you want to be. The more A's that you can get, the better. That suggests that you're in a really competitive position, and you're pursuing the right type of business, right types of tenders. So fantastic for those guys that came out with the A's. B's, quite often B is the second category, because we're trading off attractiveness for risk. So, or we're taking on more risk in response to the attractiveness of the opportunity. So we're motivated by the scale more often than not of the opportunity, which is great. But it is going to drive us to be really risk conscious as we respond to that. So that to me suggests that we really want to have strong risk management processes in our businesses. We want to have that risk management plan that I mentioned before, which looks at positive and negative risks, and we want to be managing that through the startup and delivery phases very, very, very cautiously to avoid any critical issues that might arise from that. Three. C, that came out. So C is really kind of, the third best, if you like, in terms of overall positioning. The opportunity is not all that attractive, but the risk profile is pretty low. So we find a lot of businesses going for that type of work. Quite often, those are segments of the market where you're getting squeezed for margin. There's not a lot of repeat business, but you're doing it to maintain capability or capacity, for example. And of course, where you don't want to be is D. So, for me, quite often when we were presented with a range of tendering opportunities, given the limited resources that we had, we would always try and discount the Ds, cut those out of the equation, and focus on the slightly more attractive opportunities in the A and B category, really. So not a surprising set of results there, but just some, I guess, words of caution really in terms of how you use this data. Hopefully you found it useful. I find it just gives you I guess a more structured way of presenting that data to your management team, and as a management team making decisions more confidently.
And look, we've asked you to select one tender to take you through the process, but I'm sure that you will all have within your businesses, you'll have a number of opportunities that you're looking at, and so you'll have a proportion that fall within the A, hopefully the majority fall in the A quadrant, but you may have a few that fall into that B category because you've made a business decision that you're going to have a crack at some of these ones, but you're aware of the risks that are involved. And so is that something you come across fairly often?
Absolutely. I mean, just because it's not in an A category doesn't mean we should discount it. There's a whole bunch of reasons why it might sit in B or C and we decide to take it on. Reasons include things like customer pressure or strategic positioning, or desperate efforts to maintain capability and capacity. So absolutely, we see a range of, and this to me is almost like a portfolio analysis tool, which looks at the portfolio of an organisation's tendering activity or business winning activity. You can take all your business winning pursuits and map it onto this.
So really companies can use this for individual tenders, but they could use it across their entire business to look at that portfolio of opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd encourage them to do that if they don't do that already. So hopefully that's a useful tool that you can use immediately to try and add a bit of structure and I guess maturity to the way you approach your tenders. Okay, I am mindful of the time. I know we've only got another 15 minutes, so I'm going to try and get through this back section as quick as I can. That to me was really one of the most important aspects, and through those two sections, those two assessments that we've done, we've kind of covered a lot of what we're going to discuss off anyway. So hopefully you guys understood all of that and found it useful. Again, fire in some questions if you don't, because this back section, this last 15 minutes, will really try and reinforce elements that we already covered in the assessment. Okay, so moving on. Into the win strategy and solution development section. The capture and win strategy slide that you see in front of you there, that's really designed to articulate a robust capture process that an organisation might go through and all the various activities it might undertake during a major tender activity. So obviously we go in with a solution in mind, and as much as we can, as I said before, we want to try and get in there with the customer to try and shape and influence what that solution looks like, and we want to sell internal management on the benefits and attractiveness of that solution. A key part of that is the customer relationship and understanding the customer, and we'll talk about customer hot buttons in just a second, but the essence of that really is, do we understand what is driving the customer in this procurement, and can we reflect that well enough in our solution to be competitive? A SWOT analysis is a really simple tool that I always encourage people to take on when they're doing a tender. It's that internal and external assessment of positioning. So strengths and weaknesses really look at your internal capability positioning, the people, processes, tools, technologies that you've got in your organisation at the moment, and how well placed they are to meet the customer's requirements. And then the opportunities and threats aspect, which is really an external view of how that particular opportunity or that customer segment that you're moving into might drive opportunities or create threats in your business moving forward. Again, if you've got a strategic plan, it kind of naturally aligns itself to that. From that, and really the strengths section of that, we want to try and interrogate our competitive discriminators, which is the feedback loop, or a feeder for, if you like, to the win theme and the win strategy that we develop. So I hasten to add that a strength isn't necessarily a competitive discriminator. The two things are aligned potentially, but if you've got a strength that is unique when considered against your competition, then that is potentially a competitive discriminator. So we want to identify those because they become the backbone of what we call our win strategy. And effectively become the win themes, what we call win themes within that win strategy. So it might be that, we're the only provider of a certain capability, or we've got the cheapest solution available in the market, or we've been delivering flawlessly. We've got the best performance record in the market. So, things like that need to be identified and created as the backbone of your win strategy. And then finally, we want to make sure that we tie all of that back into a high-level summary and what we call marketing communications plan. So we can feed that back into the customer, both prior to the RFT being released. So we're positioning ourselves through that. We've got a clear set of messages. We're engaging the customer more intelligently. And then we're reinforcing that in a tender submission itself. So it doesn't come as a surprise to the customer. It's just reinforcing what we've discussed with them. So that's what good looks like, guys, in terms of an overall capture and win strategy process. And for me, on major tenders, we want to be covering all of those things off. Just moving into the hot buttons and competitive discriminators a little bit more. Hot buttons for me are those things that, as I said before, don't always appear in the RFT themselves, but are absolutely critical to the customer. They're those buttons that we want to push in our solution offering, in our win strategy, to really make our tender appeal to the customer. There are often a generic set that people keep focusing on, which we should always respect. Price, we've talked about already. Price is always going to be a factor. Schedule, can we deliver in full on time? Absolutely critical. Quality needs to be a consideration. Innovation is having its day again for a bunch of different reasons. What's the level of innovation we're going to bring into the overall solution design, but also into the delivery and execution aspects of the tender. Can we do things more efficiently? Can we do things more productively? Can we reduce the cost of production? And risk, which we've talked about, which is almost an umbrella concept. Customer will always think about risk, therefore we need to be conscious that we need to project a risk managed approach to our tender submission.
So really, Nick, the customer hot buttons then, correct me if I'm wrong, the customer hot buttons are not things, they might not be explicitly stated, but they might be things that you know because you've done your homework on the customer, you've done your homework on the market, you've done your homework on the competitors. You know that these are important to the customer. They might not be in the RFT. They might not appear anywhere. You know, and I think I've seen the analogy of the iceberg used here. So that what's in the RFT is the sort of the iceberg above the water.
Tip of the iceberg.
All the hot buttons are the stuff that's below the water. You can't actually see, but you know they're there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in my experience, those things really come through a strong relationship. You know, if you've got a good, strong relationship with your customer, they're more incentivized to share those things with you prior to the RFT being released. So yeah, absolutely agree with you. Spot on definition, Grant, and another reason why we need to be really close to our customers. Once we've got that information, obviously, then we're in a much better position to define those competitive discriminators. So, you know, that's one part, what are our strengths? So one part organic, if you like, in terms of